Hey friends, and today I thought that I would talk about the meditations and why I consider it to be my favorite and most influential personal book that I have read. I read this book in my 9th year of high school. I am now 3 years out of schooling. And so I've been reading and rereading and thinking about this book for a considerable percentage of my life. Mainly, I think the most important thing that I got out of the book was not only gaining an interesting introduction into self-help and philosophy and cognitive behavioral therapy or logotherapy or any of the therapeutic studies based on ancient Hellenistic philosophy, but also that it's logical for me to try. And when I say try, I mean try in general. When reading upon my notes that I created when first reading the meditations, I came upon a maxim which I noted many times when reading the book. I'm not sure if I created it or if I found it from someone else, but it seems very generic. But ever since reading the book, it has stuck with me and been one of the most influential maxims in my life, personally at least. And the maxim is, doing the right thing is the right thing to do. And whenever I struggle to know what to do, I always know that what I should be doing is the right thing to do, and that morality and your personal values and philosophical opinions, your paradigm, honoring and following what you personally believe is right, is in the end all you can do, all that's truly in your power to do, and what you should do. And now, I think I'll read to you from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia on the meditations. Meditations, literally things to one's self, is a series of personal writings by Marcus Aurelius, Roman Emperor from 161 to 180 Anno Domini, recording his private notes to himself and ideas on Stoic philosophy. Marcus wrote the 12 books of the Meditations in Greek as a source for his own guidance and self-improvement. It is possible that large portions of the work were written in Sirmium, where he spent much time planning military campaigns from 170 to 180. Some of it was written while he was positioned at Aquincum on campaign in Pannonia, because internal notes tell us that the first book was written when he was campaigning against Quadi on the river Granova, modern-day Heron, and the second book was written at Carnotum. It is unlikely that Marcus Aurelius ever intended the writings to be published, and the work has no official title. So, Meditations is one of the several titles commonly assigned to the collection. These writings take the form of quotations, varying in length from one sentence to long paragraphs. Structure and themes. The Meditations is divided into 12 books that chronicle different periods of Marcus's life. Each book is not in chronological order, and it was written for no one but himself. The style of writing that permeates the text is one that is simple, straightforward, and perhaps reflecting Marcus's Stoic perspective on the text. Depending on the English translation, Marcus's style is not viewed as anything regal or belonging to royalty, but rather a man among other men, which allows the reader to relate to his wisdom. A central theme to Meditations is the importance of analyzing one's judgment of self and others, and the development of a cosmic perspective. As he said, you have the power to strip away many superfluous troubles located wholly in your judgment, and to possess a large room for yourself, embracing in thought the whole cosmos, to consider everlasting time, to think of the rapid change in the parts of each thing, of how short it is from birth until dissolution, and how the void before birth and that after dissolution are equally infinite. He advocates finding one's place in the universe and sees that everything came from nature, and so everything shall return to it in due time. Another strong theme is of maintaining focus and to be without distraction, all the while maintaining strong ethical principles, such as being a good man. His Stoic ideas often involve avoiding indulgence in sensory affections, a skill which will free a man from the pains and pleasures of the material world. He claims that the only way a man can be harmed by others is to allow his reaction to overpower him. An order or logos permeates existence. Rationality and clear-mindedness allow one to live in harmony with the logos. This allows one to rise above faulty perceptions of good and bad, things out of your control like fame and health are, unlike things in your control, irrelevant and neither good nor bad. History of the text. There is no certain mention of the Meditations until the early 10th century. A doubtful mention is made by the orator Thermistius in about AD 364. In an address to Emperor Valens on brotherly love, he says, "You have no need of the exhortations of Marcus." Another possible reference is in the collection of Greek poems known as the Palatine Anthology, a work dating to the 10th century but containing much earlier material. The anthology contains an epigram dedicated to the Book of Marcus. It has been proposed that the epigram was written by the Byzantine scholar Theophylact Simocator in the 7th century. The first direct mention of the work comes from Arethes of Caesarea, who lived from 860 to 935, a bishop who was a great collector of manuscripts. At some date before 907, he sent a volume of the Meditations to Demetrius, Archbishop of Heraclea, with a letter saying, "I have had for some time an old copy of the Emperor Marcus's most profitable book, so old indeed that it is altogether falling to pieces. This I have copied, and am able to hand it down to posterity in its new dress." Aurelius also mentions the work in marginal notes to books by Lucian and Dio Chrysostom, where he referenced passages in the treatise to himself. And it was this title which the book bore in the manuscript from which the first printed edition was made in the 16th century. Aurelius' own copy has now vanished, but it is thought to be the likely ancestor of the surviving manuscripts. The next mention of the Meditations is in the pseudo-lexicon published in the late 10th century. The Suda calls the work a directing of his own life by Marcus the Emperor in 12 books, which is the first mention of a division of the work in 12 books. The Suda makes use of some 30 quotations taken from books 1, 3, 4, 5, 9, and 11. Around 1150, John Tzitzis, a grammarian of Constantinople, quotes passages from books 4 and 5, attributing them to Marcus. Almost 200 years later, Nicephorus Callistus, in the Ecclesiastical History, writes that Marcus Antonius composed a book for the education of his son Marcus Commodus, full of all worldly experience and instruction. The Meditations is thereafter quoted in many Greek compilations from the 14th to 16th centuries. Wilhelm Zeilander first translated the Meditations into Latin in 1558. Manuscripts. The present text is based almost entirely upon two manuscripts. One is the Codex Palatinus, also known as Codex Toxitanus, first published in 5058 or 9, but now lost. The other manuscript is the Codex Vaticanus, 1950, and is in the Vatican Library. Codex Palatinus. The modern history of the Meditations dates from the issue of the first printed edition by Wilhelm Zeilander in 1558 or 1559. It was published at the instigation of Conrad Gesner and printed by his cousin Andreas Gesner at Zurich. The book was bound with a work by Marinus. To the Meditations was added a Latin translation by Zeilander, who also included brief notes. Conrad Gesner stated in his dedicatory letter that he received the books of Marcus from the gifted poet Michael Toxites from the library of Otto Heinrich, Prince Palatine, i.e. from the collection of Heidelberg University. The importance of this edition of the Meditations is that the manuscript from which it was printed is now lost, so that it is one of the two principal sources of all modern text. Codex Vaticanus in 1950. The Codex Vaticanus Graecus 1950 is contained in a codex which passed to the Vatican Library from the collection of Stefano Gradi in 1683. This is a 14th century manuscript which survives in a very corrupt state, and about 42 lines have dropped out by accidental omissions. Other manuscripts are of little independent value for reconstructing the text. The main ones are the Codex Darmstadtianus, with 112 extracts from books 1 to 9, and the Codex Parisinius in 319, with 29 extracts from books 1 to 4. Receptions. Marcus Aurelius has been lauded for his capacity to write down what is in his heart just as it was, not obscured by any consciousness of the presence of listeners or any striving after effect. Thus Gilbert Murray, comparing the work to Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions and St. Augustine's Confessions. Though Murray criticizes Marcus for the harshness and plainness of his literary style, he finds in the Meditations as much intensity of feeling as in most of the nobler modern books of religion, only with a sterner power controlling it. People fail to understand Marcus, he writes, not because of his lack of self-expression, but because it is hard for most men to breathe at that intense height of spiritual life, or at least to breathe soberly. D.A. Rees calls the Meditations unendingly moving and inspiring, but does not offer them up as works of original philosophy. Bertrand Russell found them contradictory and inconsistent evidence of a tired age, where even real goods lose their saviour. Using Marcus as an example of greater Stoic philosophy, he found their ethical philosophy to contain an element of sour grapes. We can't be happy, but we can be good. Let us therefore pretend that, so long as we are good, it doesn't matter being unhappy. Both Russell and Rees find an element of Marcus's Stoic philosophy in the philosophical system of Immanuel Kant. German philosopher George Hegel offers a critique of Stoicism that follows similar lines, albeit covering different trajectories. In his Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel attacks the preoccupation with the inner self as a severing, fatalistic barrier to consciousness. A philosophy that reduces all states of harm or injustice to emotional states could only appear on the scene in a time of universal fear and bondage. The Stoic refusal to meet the world is anathema to life, a central value in Hegel's philosophical work, whether on the throne or in chains. In the utter dependence of its individual existence, Its aim is to be free and to maintain that lifeless indifference which steadfastly withdraws from the bustle of existence. M. L. Clarke concurs in his historical work on philosophical ideas, The Roman Mind, where he states political liberty could hardly flourish after so many years of despotism and the indifference to public affairs which it bred, and philosophy fostered the same spirit. In the introduction to his 1964 translation of Meditations, the Anglican priest Maxwell Staniforth discussed the profound impact of Stoicism on Christianity. Michael Grant called Marcus Aurelius the noblest of all men who, by sheer intelligence and force of character, have prized and achieved goodness for its own sake, and not for any reward. Gregory Hayes' translation of Meditations for the Modern Library made the Washington Post's best-seller list for 2 weeks in 2002. The book has been described as a prototype of reflective practice by Seamus Maxuby. United States President Bill Clinton said that the Meditations is his favorite book, and former United States Secretary of Defense James Mattis carried his own personal copy of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius throughout his deployments as a Marine Corps officer in the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Quotations. Be like a rock, promontory against which the restless surf continually pounds. It stands fast while the churning sea is lulled to sleep at its feet. I hear you say, how unlucky that this should happen to me. Not at all. Say instead, how lucky that I am not broken by what has happened, and am not afraid of what is about to happen. The same blow might have struck anyone, but not many would have absorbed it without capitulation or complaint. That's Book 4, 49 by Hicks translation. If thou art pained by any external thing, it is not that which disturbs thee, but thy own judgment about it, and it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now. That is Chapter 8, Section 47, translated by George Long. A cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are briars in the road, turn aside from them. This is enough. Do not add, why were such things made in the world? That is Book 8, line or Section 50, translated again by George Long. Put an end for all this discussion of what a good man should be and be one. That's Book 10, Meditation 16. Soon you'll be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound and echo. The things we want in life are empty, stale, trivial. That's Book 5, Section 33, translation by Gregory Hayes. Never regard something as doing you good if it makes you betray a trust or lose your sense of shame, or makes you show hatred, suspicion, ill will, or hypocrisy, or a desire for things best done behind closed doors. That is Book 3, Section 7, translation by Gregory Hayes. not to feel exasperated or defeated or despondent because your days aren't packed with wise and moral actions, but to get back up when you fail, to celebrate behaving like a human, however imperfectly, and fully embrace the pursuit you've embarked on. And that's Book 5. Meditation 9, translation again by Gregory Hayes. Let opinion be taken away, and no man will think himself wronged. If no man shall think himself wronged, then there is no more any such thing as wrong. That's Book 4, Meditation 7, translated by Merrick Casaubon. Take away your opinion, and there is taken away the complaint. Take away the complaint, and the hurt is gone. That's Book 4, Meditation 7, translation by George Long. As for others whose lives are not so ordered, he reminds himself constantly of the characters they exhibit daily and nightly at home and abroad, and of the sort of society they frequent, and the approval of such men who do not even stand well in their own eyes has no value for him. That's Book 3, Meditation 4, translated by Maxwell Staniforth. Shame on the soul, to falter on the road of life while the body still perseveres. Book 6, Meditation 29, translation by Maxwell Staniforth. Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen to you since the beginning of time. The twining strands of fate wove both of them together, your own existence and the things that happen to you. Book 5, Meditation 8, translation by Gregory Hayes. In your actions, don't procrastinate. In your conversations, don't confuse. In your thoughts, don't wander. In your soul, don't be passive or aggressive. In your life, don't be all about business. And that's Book 8, Meditation 51. Before making a decision, the first thing to do, don't get worked up. For everything happens according to the nature of all things, and in a short time you'll be nobody and nowhere, even as the great emperors Hadrian and Augustus are now. The next thing to do, consider carefully the task at hand for what it is, while remembering that your purpose is to be a good human being. Get straight to doing what nature requires of you, and speak as you see most just and fitting, with kindness, modesty, and sincerity. That's Book 8, Meditation 5. What if someone despises me? Let me see to it, but I will see to it that I won't be found doing or saying anything contemptible. What if someone hates me? Let me see to that, but I will see to it that I'm kind and good-natured to all, and prepared to show even the hater where they went wrong, not in a critical way or to show off my patience, but genuinely and usefully. That's Book 11, Meditation 13. Do not act as if thou wert going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over thee while thou livest. While it is in thy power, be good. That is Book 4, Meditation 17, translated by George Long. Of the life of man, the duration is but a point. That's Book 2, 17, translated by C. R. Ains. A person who doesn't know what the universe is doesn't know who they are. A person who doesn't know their purpose in life doesn't know who they are or what the universe is. A person who doesn't know any of these things doesn't know why they are here. So what to make of people who seek or avoid the praise of those who have no knowledge of where or who they are? That is Book 8, 52. Often justice lies in what you aren't doing, not only in what you are doing. That's Book 9, 5. Whenever you suffer pain, keep in mind it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that it can't degrade your guiding intelligence, nor keep it from acting rationally and for the common good. And in most cases, you should be helped by the saying of Epicurus, that pain is neither unbearable nor unending, so you can remember these limits and not add them in your imagination. Remember, too, that many common annoyances are in pain in disguise, such as sleepiness, fever, and loss of appetite. When they start to get you down, tell yourself you are giving in to pain. That's Book 7, 64. Enough of this miserable whining life. Stop monkeying around. Why are you troubled? What's new here? What's so confounding? The one responsible? Take a good look. Or just the matter itself, then look at that. There's nothing else to look at. And as far as the gods go, by now you could try being more straightforward and kind. It's the same whether you've examined these things for 100 years, or only 3. And that's Book 9, 37. Keep this thought handy when you feel a bit of rage coming on. It isn't manly to be enraged. Rather, gentleness and civility are more human, and therefore manlier. A real person doesn't give way to anger and discontent, and such a person has strength, courage, and endurance, unlike the angry and complaining. The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. Book 11, 18, 5b. Don't tell yourself anything more than what the initial impressions report. It's been reported to you that someone is speaking badly about you. This is the report. The report wasn't that you've been harmed. I see that my son is sick, not that his life is at risk. So always stay within your first impressions and don't add them in your head. This way nothing can happen to you. And that's Book 8, 49. Drama, combat, terror, numbness, and subservience. Every day these things wipe out your sacred principles whenever your mind entertains them uncritically or lets them slip in. That's Book 10, verse 9. I'm constantly amazed by how easily we love ourselves above all others, yet we put more stock in the opinions of others rather than our estimation of ourself. How much credence we give the opinions our peers have of us, and how little to our very own. Book 12, 4. Does the light of a lamp shine and keep its glow until its fuel is spent? Why shouldn't your truth, justice, and self-control shine until you are extinguished? That's 11:15. Words that everyone once used are now obsolete, and so are the men whose names were once on everyone's lips. Camillus, Cassio, Valesius, Dentatus, and to a lesser degree Scipio and Cato, and yes, even Augustus, Hadrian, and Antoninus are less spoken of now than they were in their own days. For all things fade away, become the stuff of legend, and are soon buried in oblivion. Mind you, this is true only for those who blazed once like bright stars in the firmament. But for the rest, as soon as a few clods of earth cover their corpses, they are out of sight, out of mind. In the end, what would you gain from everlasting remembrance? Absolutely nothing. So what is left worth living for? This alone. Justice in thought, goodness in action, speech that cannot deceive, and a disposition glad of whatever comes, welcoming it as necessary, as familiar, as flowing from the same source and fountain as yourself. Book 4, 33, translation by Scott and David Hicks. Do not consider life a thing of any value, for look at the immensity of time behind thee, and to the time which is before thee, another boundless space. In this infinity, then, what is the difference between him who lives 3 days and him who lives 3 generations? Book 4, 50, translation by George Long. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer had a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but of the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. Book 2, 1, translation by Gregory Hayes. All things are interwoven with one another. A sacred bond unties them. There is scarcely one thing that is isolated from another. Everything is coordinated. Everything works together in giving form to one universe. The world order is a unity made up of multiplicity. God is one, pervading all things being is one, all law is one, namely, the common reason which all thinking persons possesses, and all truth is one. If, as we believe, there can be but one path to perfection for beings that are alike in kind and reason, that is book 7, 9 by Maxwell Staniforth. Thank you for listening to this series. You may notice that my voice has changed a little bit throughout this last recording, and that's because I've done so much recording in one sitting that I think I am starting to lose my voice. But I didn't honestly do it for any reason. I don't have to record them all at once. I was just having a lot of fun reading this, honestly. I enjoyed it, and I hope that you managed to have some sort of break and reprieve and pause and stop during this series and during this episode. Thank you for coming, and I'll definitely see you in the next one. There's many more to come, if fortune allows. And it's time to have a stop, and a break, and a reprieve, and good night.